Good afternoon. Delighted that you can all join us this afternoon for this brilliant talk. I'm delighted that we're joined by Lothar Götz, who is an artist and has been involved with Towner for a number of years now, as he was commissioned to make the Dance Diagonal large art commission on the outside of the Towner building. For those of you that have seen it, for those of you that haven't, we'll have some images to show you a little bit later on. So my name is Joe Hill, I'm Director of Towner Eastbourne. And again, just want to welcome you all and to welcome Lothar for joining me in this conversation today.
Hello. Hi.
Yeah. Hello. Yeah. I'm just going to do a few formalities and then we'll get into what we've come here to do. So there are automatic captions available throughout the talk and you can activate them using the Zoom controls. Apologies for any misspellings of words and things, as it is an automated system, so please bear with it. We have both the chat feature and the questions feature running on this talk. So if you do have any questions, can I recommend that you put them in the questions box at the bottom. And at the end of the talk, we'll try and make some time to take some of those questions live as we go on today. We are recording the talk as well. So there will be an opportunity, if you did miss anything, to revisit it at a later date through the Towner website and on our social media channels as well. This event is free, but if you'd like to support Towner and help us provide events like this in the future, we'd welcome donations of all sizes. You can Google Towner Give Today, and you can click the link that will be appearing in the chat shortly to make a donation. On top of this, I'm really grateful to both Lothar and his gallerist domobaal, who have, in addition to this, have agreed to contribute 10% of any sales from Lothar's new exhibition that we'll be talking about at her gallery in London, 10% of any sales to Towner until the 10th of March. So if anyone is interested in inquiring about any more information about any of those works that we will be showing a bit later on in the talk, then please get in touch with myself or with Claire at the gallery or with Domo directly through her website as well. So it's a really generous offer, and I must thank you, Lothar, for that, because it's an enormous help. So we're here today to talk really about two things. It's a chance for me to finally get on behind the camera with Lothar and talk a bit about the fabulous Dance Diagonal commission here at Towner. But we're also doing this talk to celebrate the new exhibition, as I mentioned, at domobaal's gallery in London, which is called Salvation. And as of the announcements yesterday, she is delighted that the exhibition should be reopening, as per government guidelines, in the middle of April, as they are a commercial gallery. Sadly, for Towner, will be in the later date, around the middle of March, and hopefully we will be able to get open then as well. So as I say, Lothar's exhibition has been sat dormant in the gallery in London. So if you do get a chance to go in April to see the exhibition, then please do. But we'll be sharing some of the installation shots and the work with you throughout the talk as well. So shall we get started?
Yeah.
Lothar, welcome, and thanks for joining me from your home studio and things. It's really great to get an opportunity to talk about some of these things. So just a little bit of background to the commission and Dance Diagonal, the artwork that you see on the outside of the building at Towner. So for our 10th anniversary in the building, we wanted to do something that would be a celebration, but would also announce a sort of, new direction for the gallery and really sort of embracing new audiences and thinking about an artwork that could start to build a new conversation with our immediate community and with the residents and people that walk past the building. So we set out on the path of creating an ambitious artwork that would cover the entire building. And I have to say, when we initiated it, we never quite thought it would have the impact that the final artwork has had. And it's been a hugely positive process, both developing the artwork with yourself, Lothar, but also watching our fabulous audience sort of enjoy the work. And it has been shared thousands and thousands of tens of thousands of times on social media channels around the world. And we still get people coming regularly to photograph it on a daily basis. I'm in the gallery today and there was a group of people coming specially to photograph the outside of it as I was walking in the building. So it truly has been a transformative artwork for both Eastbourne and for Towner itself. And it's been an absolute pleasure working with you on it. I've had the pleasure to be with you right through from when it was a competition and you made a submission to that, to you coming and spending all that time in Eastbourne and developing the artwork actually on the site. And then seeing you nervous as it was painted onto the building with the team of painters that sort of scurried across the building like ants to reveal this amazing artwork, which really has transformed the entire building into an artwork itself. When we were thinking about this commission, we did very much think that it was an artwork that we placed onto the building, but what your proposal did, Lothar, was to actually transform the building into an artwork itself. So I thought we'd talk a bit about Dance Diagonal first. And I wanted to just, first of all, get a bit from you. What were your initial thoughts when you saw the opportunity and when you saw the building, and you know, what sort of made you think about this artwork and going for this competition?
Well, I think that went in various stages. I mean, as it was a competition, you have this submission phase, and there it was clear I mean, you sent out these elevation drawings, and it was more to respond first to these elevation drawings, and my first thing was that I said, oh, this is an amazing big building. I mean, I haven't seen it in the flesh before, but I then Googled and had images, and then I immediately thought, oh, it's impossible really to submit a finished piece or a finished design. That needs to be a process, because you could see that it's very sculptural. It has lots of architectural features, and then I wasn't really clear how it sits in the landscape of Eastbourne, and so I decided just to make quite loose drawings. And it was a bit risky, because I thought, I don't know if it's possible, if someone will probably see and understand what I mean with these drawings. I mean, whenever I start a project, I actually start with drawings, and let's say quite traditionally with pencil drawings. And for quite a long stage, I leave everything fairly open before I make final decisions. It's more a kind of, it's a kind of approach to a building. It's a kind of where you slowly you get to know it a little bit, and I think in the application then I said, well, this is a kind of idea what I could do, but I can't give you more. I have to come and have to be at the building, and then whatever the real work starts of designing. And this is how it happened then. I mean, there was this idea of a drawing, and what was quite funny was, I mean, in the elevation drawing, I thought, yeah, it's far more an elevation. And when I then came and spent quite a few days in Eastbourne and saw the building, it became more and more sculptural. And every hour I discovered another little detail, and the work became bigger and bigger and bigger. And then I thought, oh, there is a little balcony. Where do I stop? And this was then a very different process to the initial drawing process. Probably the most exciting one, the one where I had to adapt my idea to the building, or get into this. I always call it a conversation with the building, because I don't want to just impose one idea. I want to then respond to something, what is there and what I find, and as well then a bit the atmosphere of the city or the surrounding as well. I mean, there are lots of different aspects, not just the architecture as a formal aspect, but as well what's going on around and the buildings around. So that was then that second phase. I mean, where I mean, yeah, which was very exciting, because there suddenly the drawing became a sculpture, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was really interesting going through that process of judging that competition, because obviously we had lots of fantastic submissions from brilliant artists, both regionally and across the world. But I think the drawing really captured us, because it was something that not a lot of them had done. A lot of people had rendered a sort of version of the artwork onto the building to sort of really demonstrate what it might look like. But there was something in the process of drawing, and we'll get a bit more into this idea of drawing a bit later, but the I don't know, it sort of opened up a window of possibility of where this artwork could go, that it wasn't a sort of fixed final 3D imagined artwork that we could all sort of work through and get onto the building, and it would pretty much look exactly as it did on the screen when we judged it. It was something that could evolve and people could possibly work with you on and sort of grow. But I remember that the conversations were that it would be really quite a bold step as an artwork, because it was very vibrant and it was suggesting really strong colors and vivid pattern. And there was a lot of conversation about how the public would react to something like this, you know. And when we started the commission, there were people, quite rightly, who have been fans of the building since it was built, and it was designed by architect Rick Mather, who sadly is no longer with us. But he, you know, is very dramatic in how it referenced modernist architecture, but also pulling in references from the cliff face of Beachy Head, this big white facade that was, for me, when I first got here, just crying out for somebody to put an artwork on it, because it was such a large expanse of white render. But a lot of the conversations were about how Eastbourne might react to it, and it got me thinking about the, you know, what the artwork's actually become, and it's much more than simply a 10th anniversary celebration. It's become almost like an emblem of what of the town, really, and how ambitious we want to be, and our aspirations as a group of people. Did you ever envision that when you set out to enter?
Well, I mean, I can remember, I mean, one of the things which I found really extraordinary was because I did submit 2 designs. I submitted that one and then one safe one. And when I got the phone call, I was sure it's the safer one and not this one. And then I think I had at some point, I asked them because I thought, and then you said, no, it's that one. We've chosen this one. And then I was extremely happy because I can remember I thought, oh God, this is very brave. This is, I wonder how that will transform the building. And I mean, for me, it was, it was pretty clear from the beginning that that is a statement in a town. It's in the middle of the city center, and it works really like, I mean, I always said it's a bit like dressing up a building for something, but it's, I mean, it will have lots of, I mean, already when I was working there, and it was clear it has lots of interactions with its surrounding, and then of course as well with the people who are there. And then I think, I mean, what I found there very exciting was the thing that it does turn Eastbourne into a gallery, I would say. I mean, because Towner becomes one artwork or one specific thing within a city center. And I think because I think it changes, probably as it changes the perception onto that building, it will change as well a bit, or influence the perception to other buildings, or in which relationship we see them. So, I mean, that opportunity, and I mean, I must say, one doesn't have that very often. I clearly, I mean, I did works outside, but I clearly never had the opportunity to do something so bang in the center. And I clearly wanted to do something uncompromising. And that's what was so great. I mean, I could really do whatever I wanted. And we didn't know, I mean, it wasn't clear how people, I mean, how the audience will, or the general public, I mean, people who are not probably visitors from the gallery, but are just passers by, how they will react. So there is always a bit of that risk, but that's as well exciting. I mean, I think you, and I mean, then there has been all this response, which was of course fantastic.
I think it has. I mean, one of the couple of things I forgot to mention earlier on is that we are all thankful to Brewers, who were a fantastic sponsor for the original commission, and also part of this talk is a celebration of the fact that we've extended the artwork through to 2024, which is great, which will mean it will have been on the building for a full 5 years at that particular point. And it just shows you the impact of the final artwork when it was initially intended to be there for a year as part of that 10th anniversary celebration. And almost the thought of removing it has caused quite a controversy in the town. And I've regularly see people that say you can't ever get rid of it. It's impossible to get rid of that now because it's just become so much part of what Towner does and what Eastbourne does as well. There's a few people actually on the chat asking to see those initial drawings from the submission. I'm sorry to say we don't actually have them. It would have been really nice to show those original pencil crayon drawings. A bit later on, we'll show some images of the drawings in Lothar's current exhibition, Salvation. But maybe there's a way we can share some of the images of the original artwork that you produced. Yeah. But I thought what we would do is just go to some images of the building actually, and maybe talk through a little bit about the process of how you developed the work, and particularly I think the use of drawing. Because one thing I was really surprised by was not only was the submission in pencil crayon and this drawing, but also when you spent a long time, and you actually spent a really long time at the gallery in Eastbourne, you were developing lots of different versions of the artwork and testing the color schemes using colored pencil. And it was something that, is rare these days because, computers could quite easily show you color combinations and demonstrate what something might look like in relationship. But it was a really nice process to see you realize it within a drawing before any of those final decisions were made. So I'm just going to see if this works and share.
Yeah, I mean, from the drawings, I mean, I always come back to that I think what I love with drawings is that it's not perfect and that it has this kind of open state. It has this openness where, because I mean, like when, I mean, as you can see the result, the interesting phase is basically for me that conversation with the building. And what I try to, and as well in other projects when I do site-specific work, what I try to avoid is to have a fixed idea and then just think how does that now fit, or how can I adapt that space so that the work looks the best there. And I think there are different approaches people have and artists have, and they're all fine. People have their different methodologies and ways of working. But for me, it's that process is very important. And often I say it's not even really the result. I often do not know completely what the result will be. It is really that dialogue with, I always say I can't, because I get quite often asked, oh, could you do a work for that? We show you some photos and we're pretty sure you can work from that. And then often people are surprised when I say, no, that's actually not possible. And I don't want to do it this way. And I need to have that physical contact. And very often the work involves there in kind of nearly automatically. And often when I do a site visit, and I usually give as well there enough time, or when I have to travel, I usually say if it's not very close, then I say I want to stay overnight because I want to look at the building probably inside as well here now in the evening or so. Now here it was great. I just stayed in the hotel opposite and I could actually see the building through the hotel windows. And I always think, I mean, what I like with drawing is as well, and I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned that with approaching the colors is the way that you need a certain time to fill a field with color. If you do that on a computer, it's often done with a click. Now I sometimes I start and I'm not sure if it's the right color. And when I filled it in, I usually know if it's right or not. And how I'm working there, it's kind of the design space or what you see on paper in the process is basically just a side result. I always say it's not the real process. The real process is that conversation between me and the space or the building. And it does not really, sometimes I would describe it that it does not really feel completely like work. I often have lots of teas or cappuccinos, or walk around, sit around, and I think some people might probably say, are you actually doing anything? I mean, or what is it? But the idea is very often they do not as well come or get finalized then at that place. Very often they get finalized days later or on the way back, or it can happen. I mean, very often I reach that moment that I look at in a space or at a building, and it's nearly like emptying out my head. And usually there's always once that moment of desperation that I think I never ever find an idea, or I never ever can make a decision, because the way how the design develops is then that there are lots of options. And I think when you fix one option, immediately in the head, another option appears. That's with the colors as it is with the shapes, because I always think all these works, they are an option, how one can change a space, and a different option is possible as well. And you can do it the other way around. Or like here, for instance, I mean, you have to make one decision. I mean, like I made that main point, which is that point where all these triangle shapes come together, like pinning a needle somewhere and then pulling strings, which I thought had for me something to do with the energy of that wave, one could call that that wall. And then suddenly there is this stone, I mean, that terrace in the middle, which is like thrown at the building, and there you have to break the design. But I mean the triangles and the shapes, they go in some way, they go with the building, and then they probably go a bit against it. But what was in this, I mean, particularly with the town, a very, very dominant was as well to observe the light and to observe the building on different times of the day and in different weathers. I mean, like we can see here now, the bright sunshine, because the facade is quite sculptural, it creates all these amazing shadows, and they're constantly changing. So when I realized there are these niches, I mean, where the windows are and the lift, and that back entrance, then at first, I mean, this wasn't really where the work could only develop on site, because as you can see here, it's that the light made certain shapes, and then I just added them, and at some point the shadow lines, they nearly come together with the fixed line of the dividing line of the two colors, and sometimes they move away. So there were really lots of aspects, and I mean, I think it's then a process where at some point you have to make a decision, and that's always the moment which I fear nearly the most, because when you fix something and it's a decision made, then that can be quite a bit painful, because you then throw others' ideas away, and you have to say, okay, that's that now. But I mean, I must say, I mean, when I was there, I mean, working there for the building was just a fantastic experience, and was a really great way to work with architecture and with the surrounding as well. I mean all the buildings and how Towner, I mean, the building sits in the city center with the front, and very different characters with the building. I mean, the conference center, a building which I really love the architecture as well, next to it, then the kind of more Victorian architecture of the hotels, then the school opposite, and then the tennis court on the back gives a very different character. And I mean, what I try to do is really to, with paint and with something really two-dimensional, to highlight something from, or change that identity of that building into a sculpture itself.
I think the talking about observations, and then when we spoke the other day, we talked a lot about this idea of looking. And both of us had been through art school with this drilled into us that we were learning to look, not learning to do. And I think that you beautifully sum that up in the approach to your artwork, which I think is why it's so incredibly successful. I mean, it's just, I suppose, lucky that this picture is at the time when the shadows in the two niches, the balcony on the first floor and the lift loading bay on the ground floor, is around where those lines were. So, you know, that the idea that this is performative is you being in the space at a particular temporal moment, looking from a particular angle. I mean, the way you talk about the different views and observations of the building, it has a real architectural language, the way you approach it. You know, how architects will move around a space and look at different vistas and how buildings sit. I mean, it was really lucky that you were in the hotel directly opposite this, as you say, so you could have this view of the building from your window and watch how the light moved across this amazing facade, because in the afternoon, the sun comes directly onto there. But there are new observations that have appeared since the artwork was installed. For example, the school opposite, the windows have these amazing reflections.
Yeah.
That everybody comments on. If the sun hits the side fascia of the building, then this reflection that comes from the glass opposite it's like a jewel in this, what is a white and, you know, fairly sort of plain building. It's a sort of colorful jewel. And what it means is there's a relationship with the artwork from inside the building as well. So as people sort of go up through the lift, and you can just see the lift in that glass slit there in the middle, or they're in the cafe, they can see the commission moving and changing in those reflections. Is that something that you envisaged or you enjoy now when you visit?
Well, I did. This was, I think, one. I mean, to be honest, these reflections, I think, was not the first thing I did plan in, or I wasn't directly aware. But when it started to happen, I think it was very exciting. And that with color, and then there's some glass, this can happen quite quickly, or and it happened in previous projects as well. So I was vaguely aware of it, but it happened in a very dramatic way, which I found really exciting when I saw it. And I mean, but what I find interesting is that aspect what you mentioned with the perception. And for me, that is something where I mean, if I think in which way I was very happy from the response then as well from lots of people. Or I mean, this photo is now quite as well good in that, is that I think the colors or the work they can, it's not just that we really see that or that we look at that, or that I mean what I want is that process, what I do, that I look at it. I mean, I study it, I look at the shadows, I look at the colors, that kind of way opens up options as well then in afterwards when the thing is done, for the painting itself and for the viewer, and that so that the viewer itself will influence the image, like here it becomes nearly a backdrop for that person passing by, and I think people there have that I found really exciting, that so many people have responded in a very dramatic way to using it as a backdrop, or using it, I mean, and making photographs or jumping up. I mean, one of the things I found the most amazing was that I was looking at, I mean, it was in the first days when I was a few days in Eastbourne, and I realized that there were lots of more school kids. It was mainly teenagers passing by, and at one specific spot, nearly everybody made a jump. And I thought, this is really extraordinary, that it seems to be they go into a own conversation with the work. But I mean, for me, I mean, like when things are happening there with the reflections, or as well these elements, I mean, that I think when after the work was done, the relationship or the histories of all the buildings around, we see we look at them from a different angle, it suddenly highlights something. I mean, this is something like you mentioned as well, drawing, which I always love with drawing so much, that it's not just the result. To be honest, I was as well, when I was at art school and when we do drawings, I was never that much interested in the perfect result of a drawing, but I was interested that drawing makes us look more openly, or that we see things more clearly. It makes us look and see things. And I think that artworks, particularly in public art, they can do that as well. I mean, that you just when you look at one thing very clear, that you see another thing with different eyes as well, and it does this slight shift of, I mean here, I just enjoyed that, and that people then responded in that way as well, that there was a building and that has a function, and suddenly there is something else. It's not just, these colors are not really about the function. They are about something different. They respond as, or they awake as well other things in people. So it's, we are, and I mean, it's on the other hand, it's a very clear abstract piece, and I mean, and one can probably have references to, let's say, to modernism, to Bauhaus, to visionary ideas, but then it can as well become just like celebratory decor. I mean, so often what I like in works is when we can approach it from a more, let's say, art historical way to look at it, but then as well from a way which has absolutely nothing to do with that, which has references to very daily life experiences, or which is I mean color, I think, very directly hits one. I mean color is something you see it, and probably you do not have to think about it. It does something to you.
I mean, it's interesting that you talk about the young people jumping, because I've seen that as well. And I've seen loads of Instagram pictures where people are dancing and moving. And the piece is called Dance Diagonal. You have spoken previously about the relationship of music and particularly dance to your work. And we've talked a bit about architecture, but where do you think dance plays a role in this particular work?
Well, for me, the composition is like a choreography. So it's a bit like, I mean, it's the shapes dancing on the building, and I mean, it's, for me, it's a dance of colors. And I mean, some of the, this is a good image. I mean, when I always did this, I did set a few certain points of the building where lots of shapes connected and then they went out, and it's a little bit like following the view of our eyes. So you could have, I mean, all these shapes I see as a kind of movement, because if you follow it, I mean, not just as a viewer, you basically have to move a bit to do it, but it is a move with our eyes. I mean, either up or down. And if we now follow, I mean, what I do now with my hand, I mean, if I follow that this way and that way and that way, then it becomes like, I mean, a kind of modernist dance. And I think all these shapes, they kind of move with each other, and they're not static. So it's, I mean, I was always, I mean, since I was young, I mean, dance was always very important. And I mean, I love dance as professional, whatever, classical, modern dance on stage. And I was as well someone who loved really going clubbing, and have lots of memories of stroboscopic lights and just closing the eyes on a dance floor and go into the music is just something where was heaven for me. So it has, I mean, dance has something to do there with quite a few things. I mean, like I mean, on one hand, I mean, I think people who have been clubbing, there are probably memories of light whatever lightostropic things and all the flashlights on a dance floor and the moving. But here as well, it's basically, I mean, I called it dance diagonal because I think it's a dance of diagonal lines. And on one hand, it's really geometric, but on the other hand, I think one can probably quite easily bring it back into memories where I mean, probably of dancing and clubbing, and which is a bit the opposite of being geometric. I mean, geometry we always associate with something quite rational, but for me that's not. That includes the opposite as well, a quite emotional setting of movement and color.
Like you say as well, it has this sort of upward motion, which is part of it's sort of uplifting feel as well. And I suppose we can't ignore the fact that it's taken on a whole new role through this last year. And we've had no end of emails just from people saying how it has supported them through this really challenging period because they've been able to walk past it on their daily exercise. And it's uplifted them as they've sort of moved through, particularly I think this last lockdown that everybody's found particularly hard through the deep winter months. It's been a real point of joy for a lot of people in the town, and I'm sure it's helped them to get through this very challenging period. So it's remarkable really how it's taken on these different roles for what it's done for us as a building and also what it's done for the community. I'm just going to move on a bit to talk about your exhibition as well, Lothar, because I mean, it's worth saying to the audience that you have conducted quite a number of these large-scale site-specific artworks, including in other art galleries like Leeds Art Gallery in Yorkshire and in Pallant House in West Sussex as well, on the staircases there, which again are artworks that respond to a particular site. But if we go on to your exhibition that's currently on, not to an audience, but hopefully from April will be to a live audience, called Salvation, you're sort of welcomed in the main room by a sort of larger wall painting. And then there are a number of smaller drawings and paintings that make up the exhibition. I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the title and Salvation, and I suppose where that's come from, where the thinking behind the exhibitions come from, and then to talk a bit about the relationship of how you work in this way with the site-specific paintings, and then moving that into what are quite small and intimate drawings and paintings as well that are on paper and canvas and things like that. Just the relationship is of interest, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the show was in some way it's a little bit, I mean, it has one wall painting, but in scale and everything, it's a bit like the opposite of a huge site-specific wall painting. And I mean, the title Salvation had different references. And I mean, one thing was it took on actually the idea of how we worked and how artists worked and how conditions were during the pandemic, particularly during the first lockdown. It was a clear response to that in one instance. I mean, to see, I mean, how we were all reduced, whatever, to small scale and working in a studio and working with drawings. I mean, of course, that relationship between a big work, I mean, doing something like the Towner, doing the wall painting on Towner, or working in the studio on a small drawing. It's something which I do, I mean, regularly side by side, and it's something which I, in some way, always think I need both. I mean, because it's a very different process if you realize a big work, or if you're sitting in your studio and you do a small intimate drawing, because it opens. I always think it opens different little doors in your brain, and you are in a very different setting. Now here for Salvation, I mean, as I said, the idea was to all the works are fairly small scale, and that was deliberate. I mean, to say that they were all done in a setting which was a kind of lockdown setting. But then they all had this idea as well of what the word says, salvation, I mean, about something like, yeah, it responded to all these feelings in lockdown, and then as well the idea, oh, will we ever get out of that, or what could be a way out of this? And then, I mean, a bit similar like the response you mentioned from the work in Eastbourne. I think I used that then myself as well, a bit color and lines and the shapes to transport yourself into a different, maybe better world, or into some fantasy. I mean, one thing, I mean, with smaller works or with drawings, which I particularly love from the medium drawing, is that drawing is something we can do very, very easily. We don't need a lot. And if it is, if we see drawings as a mean of developing ideas, it can open so much fantasy, and it can transport us in so many different worlds. And yeah, so when we then were working for the exhibition, I then at some point said I had such an urge to do a wall painting, and then I said, oh, I can't just do the small works. I really, really want to do a big, and then the regulation, it was possible. And then I did the wall painting in a very, again, in a domestic setting. And that was kind of a theme through the show. But then again, as well, salvation came a bit back to, as we said in the press release. I mean, for me, there was a gay club in earlier on. I mean, in my early time when I was in London, when I still went regularly clubbing in Vauxhall, called Salvation. And it had then as well this reference of not just particularly that club, but about this idea, what we were all missing as well during lockdown, being somewhere and listening to music. I'm an enormous fan of techno music, and really like to go into that flow of a music. And for me, it's something very similar, like a geometric abstract painting, and yeah. And so there were these different references. I mean, one to this idea as well, a little bit like what a spiritual space without religion now could be, or which helps us finding some salvation, or yeah, as I said as well, the link to nights out and clubbing and being in this light and the music and the colors.
So these two sort of the sort of strands of work, the sort of site-specific works and the drawings and the paintings, sort of sit in parallel for you within each other.
Yeah. I mean, for instance, this one was something I did particularly. During lockdown, I got quite a big fan of the kitchen disco from Sophie Ellis Bextor. And I thought it was just because it summoned up, because I was always in the kitchen, and then I did these painting much bigger for a show years ago in Copenhagen, and then I did these paintings very small, and they suddenly became, this could easily be a big wall painting, and it summed up that feeling like you felt like when you've been in the kitchen, and you probably, yeah, it's in the evening, and you open a bottle of beer and you put on a bit of music, and then for a few moments you have this in a very encapsulated thing, you live this kitchen disco life. So this is why that became the series Kitchen Disco. And I mean, I did there as well quite a few of the drawings, which all of them, I mean, many of my works in the drawings are a bit like, I mean, they're similar, like when I respond to architecture or buildings and its surrounding. Lots of the work is a respond to an artist or architect's vision, or is in some way taking on something from art history or from movements. I mean, I regularly come back to the art movement of early modernism, particularly the Bauhaus, because I I still find that always very fascinating, particularly the way, or why I felt very close was the way someone like, for instance, Oskar Schlemmer with the tragic ballet, how artists there, nearly all of them crossed boundaries and jumped a bit between different genres, and as well did something where the viewer and the response was in the middle, or was a center point. I mean, like all the site-specific works for me, they can't live there. They are not ending where the work ends. It's the viewer and everything and the interactions, or like in Eastbourne, the town becomes part of the work. And when I do then little drawings, or when I do smaller works, I often look at artists' work which I probably admire, and which I think they had a similar approach to social aspects in their work, like where I feel very close to. And it's probably not, I think, I mean, the geometry, or as well the shapes and everything, I mean, it comes together because, I mean, I personally, I always loved abstract art, and I think it was a bit like, because it was something which, I mean, when I was at school, I wasn't allowed to do abstract art. It was kind of still banned, or it was a kind of, I mean, being German from my generation, we had as well still that whole history, of course, of Nazi Germany, of their degenerated art. And I think my generation was still very much influenced as well by that idea that, I mean, to follow up something which was basically not allowed. So it had as well there this political aspect of doing something, and not just a formal aspect. I mean, I was always very much, I mean, this crossing and these visionary ideas, I think they're all still, I mean, of course, nowadays they're getting dated, and one reads them differently in a different time. And I'm definitely, I mean, today, when it's in a very different position than at that time. But I do find this idea of dreaming with color of an abstract world still very, very exciting.
We talked quite a bit about Dance Diagonal and the process of sort of realizing the artwork, and this idea that you very much set out without a finished product in mind. And I'm just wondering how that approach sort of relates to some of the paintings and the drawings, because I mean, there's real complexity in getting the crisp relationship of these colors together. So the idea that you might set out for something with an image like this, without knowing what the outcome might be, that must provide a tension or a challenge in the production of the work.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite interesting what you point out there. I mean, I think that for me the process is very important, and I'm actually not that much interested in the result. The result that I sometimes think it's just happening, but within these stages, I mean, it's what is, I think, like in a process like developing the work for the Towner, there the main thing is that work on site, and that viewing, observing, and then kind of letting that settle in my brain or somewhere, and then through the dialogue, that process just has in the end a result. And with the drawing, it's a bit similar. I mean, with the way I draw is that I never, with the drawings, the way they're done, I never correct. So it's not like, and the way I'm doing it, you actually can't correct anything. And as well with the paintings, I actually never correct anything. It's something quite weird. I mean, it was as well when I had to write a dissertation, when I did my biggest dissertation when I was a student in Germany. I said to my supervisor, I said, I will not correct anything. Is that okay? And I wrote the sentences down, and I didn't correct a single sentence. And that was quite, I think there is something where, I don't know why there is, but I think it opens something. In the end, you'll probably come up with a fairly, someone would say, oh, but this looks perfect, but it's not about that. I'm not really interested in perfection, but I think that, I mean, when I do, I mean, of course you can paint in a different way now. They are painted not in a, let's say, in a brushwork or expressionist painterly way. That they are, the way they're painted is quite a disciplined thing, that you tape them and then you and I'm not interested in the brush mark. It's really about the color itself. But in the end, I just don't want people really to think about it. I want then that interplay between the shapes and the colors. And I mean, with an image like that, for instance, which is called Ecstasy, I don't know the result. I start with one, and while I'm working, I actually can hardly see the image because half of it is taped up. So I respond, like with the other work, from one color to the other. And for me, like, I mean, I think not now, but I sometimes I've mentioned that for looking at a site-specific work, and particularly that was important in a work like in staircases. I've done several works in staircases. I mean, like in Chichester, Pallant House, or in Leeds at Leeds Gallery. How we view an image, the memory is very important, I think, because if you have a big site-specific piece, you can never see the whole piece. So you see basically only elements. And I very much believe that we have in our brain what we've seen just before that's stored. And so we basically constantly make up a new image through that what is there and what we just see now. And that's something I particularly like in, for instance, in staircase scenarios, where we always go up and down and we move automatically. And suddenly, and we always see, according to the height where we are, a different image. That's, of course, for instance, in Towner, there probably one of the most exciting changes are there when you see the thing from outside and then you go up and then you are in the coffee area and then you go out and you basically look at the image from the body of the painting itself. And it's not clear, and the borderline between the the balustrade and the horizon and the work is quite fluid. And yeah, and that's something in the process of the work. I mean, I sometimes then sit down, and sometimes I have to then open one shape and see what is there actually, which color. But the thing comes, and very often it can happen that I have something in a work which actually annoys me when I see it in the end, or I think that doesn't really go with that. But I don't change that, because it's not about that. It's not about, the works are not about harmony or perfection, or that they do not fulfill a color theory, and they do not fulfill as well a real geometric rule, apart from the fact that I think I probably have some kind of measurements there, which I take from my body. I mean, I was always a huge, or I'm still a huge fan of an Austrian writer, Thomas Bernhard, and he writes in one book very much that he explains in a book that we compare everything we see and we think with the geometry of our own body. And that was a sentence which completely struck to me, and where I thought, oh, am I really, is the dynamic of my face, or is it, am I looking everything, am I judging every shape in its correspondence to another one through that? And I found that very interesting, and maybe there is something in that, because I mean, when one works always with that, of course, it becomes a very dominant part, but there isn't a rule. I mean, so and if if something is wrong and the rule is broken, then I love that.
That's really interesting, because I mean, I think you think about the golden mean as well, and a lot of those measurements start to come into the human body.
Yeah.
But when we talked about dance diagonal and the relationship of the sky, and the choosing of that color was the relationship of the lintel over the top of the building and the sky. And actually that relationship is as important as the relationship of the color here and here. I'm just a bit conscious of time, and we know we've got some questions. So what I'm going to do is just stop sharing this so I can see some of these questions. Just wanted to go through a few, see if we can answer some of these before we run out of time. So we've got one here. How long did it take to paint the building from Maximus, age 8? So how long did it take to paint Towner originally? I think it was about 2 weeks, wasn't it, in total?
3 weeks. I think it
was 3 weeks from start to finish.
Longer.
Yeah, it was certainly, it was a long and stressful process. I remember.
Yeah. No, I mean I mean, when I saw it first, I thought, I mean, the sheer scale, and then, I mean, well, the practicalities. I mean, you have to work outside. It's windy. It might rain, and it was really dramatic going up that lift when you were there on the top, and you had the view over Eastbourne. You only realized, and I mean, there were quite a number of guys working on it. I mean, physically, what challenge that was.
We've got an interesting one here, which is from close. It says, would you be offended if someone referred to the Towner wall painting as street art? There's obviously a distinction, but it would be interesting to hear your view on any relationship with this genre.
Well, no, I wouldn't say. I mean, definitely not offended. And I mean, it depends what street art is. I mean, street art as thing, I mean, it is on the street, so in some way it is street art, I would say, because but of course it's probably in a different context. So but it depends. I mean, if one defines street art as it has to be illegal, or it has to have a certain graffiti language, then I mean, I'm probably not that close, I mean, to that language. But in terms of color, and in terms of how to occupy a space and to do something, I think there are as well certain similarities. And I mean, there are some aspects which probably I'm miles away, but others, they overlap.
And then, yeah, it's a really interesting conversation, and one we're having in Eastbourne. I think work has actually sparked a lot of conversation about street art in Eastbourne, and just working in the public realm. And I have lots of conversations about exciting projects that are taking place potentially over the town. Somebody's asked about the tennis tournament and their reaction to the artwork. And actually, I can answer that, because it was overwhelmingly absolutely loved it. They thought it really brought an energy and excitement to the tournament 2 years ago. Sadly, it didn't happen last year, but we are informed it will happen this year. And Gavin, one of the organisers, said to me, please make sure that's still there for the tennis tournament. So the answer to that is they were really delighted with it. And the final question is probably a good one to end on, because it'll allow me to recap and things, which is which gallery is the Salvation exhibition taking place in? So it's domobaal is the gallery, and there's a link to the website in the chat now as well. So if people want to click on that link, and they can get the address information and details of how to go and see that exhibition. Well, we're coming up to an hour now, Lothar, so I just want to sort of thank you. Thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us. We could go on and on and on I'm sure we could talk endlessly. I didn't even touch on colour, which is amazing. We didn't even touch a little bit on colour, but I wanted to talk to you all about colour. But we'll save that for another time. I'm sure we'll have another opportunity to speak again. So thanks to Lothar, thanks to Domo as well, Lothar's gallerist again. That exhibition should be open, all being well, after the 12th of April, when the restrictions are lifted for commercial galleries. Please go along and see the exhibition. And again, just a reminder that sales of any of the work in the exhibition, including books and prints as well, Domo and Lothar very kindly donating 10% of those sales to the Towner which is fantastic. And that's till the 10th of March. So anybody interested in that, then please get in touch with me, Claire, or directly to Domo as well. And just to say as well, just a reminder, this is a free event. So please, if you do feel like donating to Town, there is a link in the chat. And I will say goodbye. Thank you very much, Lothar. And I'm sure we've got lots to fill another conversation at some point in the future.
Yeah, no, it was a great pleasure. Thanks very much as well.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye. Bye. It was suddenly gone.